Record. Hello,
What's
Dr.
happening?
Sundiata. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Pretty good, pretty good. I am super stoked, in case you have not, you can't tell on my face, to have you in this space with me because I've followed you on social media across platforms, and I just find your mind, your brands, your essence, and your being to be brilliant and illuminating. So thank you for sharing space
Yeah.
with me.
Thank you. Thank you. And likewise, I find your mind and your brand and what you stand for to be amazing. It's been a pleasure being connected to you as well for about a year and a half now, I believe, that since we, came into each other's awareness and the
No.
work you do, the content you put out, the rate that you put it out. I mean, just your genius and your heart and mind, just it's amazing. I'm happy to bear witness.
Now I'm gonna cry. Don't make me cry. Thank you. I really, as somebody who I respect deeply, that means a lot. So thank you very much. So this is going to be a little bit shorter than I usually do because I just, hang out with my friends here and chop it up. Sometimes it's an hour and a half. But this will be more condensed, which is better for listeners anyway. So
Mhm.
I want you to begin by first introducing yourself, who you are, and what you do, so
Okay.
people can, get a little idea and a taste.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm Sunjata. Sunjata. My first and last name are spelled differently, but I pronounce them the same.
Look at that.
And say it again.
Look at that. And in my brain, I've just been like Sundiata Sunjata.
Yeah, that's what most people assume. So, but
Oh.
yeah, so Sunjata means sun lion, and
Mm.
it means that in Mandinka, which is a indigenous West African tribe. It's my chosen name. I chose that name back in 2018. Um, and so yeah, and the most people see, Americans will see the first name and say Sundiata or Sundiata, but the Mandinka pronunciation of that spelling is Sunjata. So yeah, that's how I came to that. And let's see. So I am an anti-oppression facilitator, organizer, and content creator. And under that, there's that umbrella. I do a number of things. I have a consulting firm called Grow Dialogue, where we help organizational teams communicate, collaborate, and resolve conflict more efficiently and effectively and peacefully. We work with corporations and groups and teams. We've worked with people all across the world. It's been a great run with that work. I also have put out several podcasts into the world. I've done a lot of trainings and work in the unschooling space, supporting schools and just parents and unlearning the things that are necessary to support their children in that space. Conscious parent. Um, yeah, I'm polyamorous. I put out a lot of content.
We do share the Conscious Parenting Faith group. I seen your name and I was like, oh,
Yes,
okay, yeah,
yes.
good. I'm listening. I'm
I
listening.
go way back into my conscious parenting journey started back in like 2012. And I'm polyamorous and I put out a lot of content. And I think that's also an important part of my anti-oppression work is just
Yes.
showing up in that space as a cis, hetero male that moves the way I move. I think that's unique and for a lot of people to see. So I live it out loud. So I have a podcast called Sunshine and Rainbows that I put out content in that way. So a lot of different things I do under the umbrella of the title I gave.
I think that that's super important. I also want to clarify because I know people are like, girl, you just said that you knew this man and you respect him. You don't even know his name. I've always just called him Sunjata, but he's Dr. Sunjata Sunjata. And I was like, I want to give him the reverence
Um,
deserved. So I try to use your first name, but I've never been that like formal. I just say Sunjata. So
yeah.
thank you for that extra level of knowing what's going on with your name. I appreciate that. And I think that with anti-oppression work, right, versus anti-racism education, right? Because I became TikTok famous, like I like to say it, and people told me who I was. Oh,
Mm.
Desiree is this anti-racist educator. And I'm like, no, 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 actually I'm not. Like that's that's like one portion, right? Like underneath the umbrella of oppression, we need to look at all of these systems. And I think that that's super important to bring in the polyamory, the conscious parenting, right? Because
Mhm.
even in my own podcast or my own Substack, which you also have that I adore, um, I think that people are get confused, right? We're so used to certain type of branding, like,
Yeah,
oh, it must be this. This is what they're talking about. Why are they talking about, well, this month she was doing parenting, this month she's talking about relationships. I'm like, because all of those systems intersect.
yes,
And we
yes,
need, if we're talking about anti-oppression, we got to unravel all of it.
yeah.
Uh, so
Agree.
thank you for doing that tireless work.
Oh my goodness. My pleasure, and thank you for doing the same. And I appreciate your work so much because you are so systems aware and you are so aware of the interrelatedness and the interconnectedness of all these systems. And you understand that none of them make an impact in isolation. It's all interrelated.
Like every single type of way at all times happening simultaneously. And I think that when we add the dimension to it, it it, it inflates it, right?
Yeah.
Like instead of this one dimensional, let's just deal with racism. Yes, obviously racism is important to us. We are black, and that's our first identity, right? But and also I cannot dismantle one without recognizing all of the others. So
Yeah.
all of that being said, today I wanted to talk about the construct of like manhood and more specifically masculinity. And then that shows those interconnectedness, right? Because there's masculinity, manhood, and then how does that show up for you as a black man, as a
Yeah.
black
Yeah.
cis man, a black cis hetero man, as a
Mhm.
black cis hetero father who's
Mhm.
polyamorous, who
Mhm.
works in corporate? Like you see how it's all happening, all of the
Mhm.
multiplicities. And for me, it's just so yummy. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
okay. My first little question would be as however you choose to show up and identify in this answer. But I'm gonna ask, like, as a black boy, I'm a mother of a black boy,
Mhm.
um, and new to my solo parenting journey, right? So him not having someone here to directly, though I have amazing men in my community that I could feel like I could call and be like, yo, I need you to get shorty and talk to him or do this and other thing, but not having that daily person to mimic or what have you. What
Mhm.
does Black masculinity at its foundation feel like for you when you were coming up? What generation are you? How has that shifted? Just some of those little things. But let's start with the foundation.
Okay, so foundational. So it's important, I think, for me to share that I was born and raised in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I grew up in the 1980s during the height of the crack epidemic, going to school and being in an environment for those formative years from kindergarten to ninth grade, in one of the most notorious projects in West Philly, seeing broken glass and cracked valves
Oh
in
no, go
my
ahead and name that, please, because we forget about Black massacres in America. So please go on and drop the name of that one.
Yeah, yeah, no doubt. Hold on, you said black. Oh, you mean of the projects?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, like during, so we're talking about like the move bomb. You grew up during that time. What are we talking about?
No, no, I'm just
Oh
sharing
no,
like
that okay.
I was sharing some even though yes, but I was sharing just the environmental context that I was raised in.
Okay,
And
gotcha.
so it's interesting you brought that up because I was probably about 6 years old during the move bombing. But that wasn't too far from, it was in West Philly, where I was born and raised. And but going to school in the shadows of the Mill Creek Projects, 46th Street, in West Philly, again, a lot of violence, just a wild environment to think back on it. Literally, we would play football and play in the playground, and it was littered with broken glass and cracked valves and intravenous needles that the crackheads, were in the schoolyard shooting up the night before.
Yeah.
And this was like the environment that I just navigated day to day, and there was fights all the time. We in the school, rival schools coming, and I'm like, again, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, and we having gang wars and fights with other schools and stuff. So, you know, I think that says a lot in terms of like what masculinity was to me, in my formative years. It was all about survival. It was all about safety. It was all about learning how to be tough. It was about learning how to not give a F, if you know what I'm saying, because at any moment somebody was trying to, steal you, knock you out, steal something from you, like all this stuff that was just a part of my upbringing that kind of, you know, informed what masculinity was to me as a young man. And I talk about my writings. I write a lot. You mentioned that, and I wrote this piece called "My Violent Youth and the Systems That Raised Me," and it's over on my Substack. But I talk about how I was a very violent young man, and but it was because I was a part of. It was my environment, and so the irony is. So I'll guess I will start with that and saying that informed my awareness around, what it meant to be a man, a boy in that type of environment. And then I had I can't think of the word, but every summer I would go south to my dad's parents' house. My dad's from a small town in Florida called Apalachicola, Florida, on the
Oh, wow.
Panhandle in between like Tallahassee and Panama City, very small town. Um, and my grandfather, my dad's father, he was like a school principal, a superintendent, and this very like esteemed person in this small town. Um, and I was raised up north in like a single mom household. And my dad was in Philly. He was around, but he didn't live with us. And but then when I would go south to spend time with his parents, we were struggling all year, in Philly, but then I would go down there. My grandfather lived a pretty affluent life. So my friends down south thought I was like rich. And then, but up north, I was just a regular old working class poor kid,
Right.
single mom. And it was like this very interesting thing. But I looked up to my granddaddy. I share that to say, I really looked up to my granddaddy. He really instilled this idea of like education is important. He came from very meager beginnings and he, you know, made a life for himself that I admired. And I always looked at him. I called him the blueprint. I admired and aspired to have the impact that I saw that he was having on people. And that also did a lot for helping to, give me a vision for, masculinity in my formative years.
I absolutely love the depth and the various identities, right? As somebody who grew up, and I think that this is an interesting segue, or maybe not, or maybe it's a fearing of having those same systemic issues, right? I grew up in the South Bronx when it was called Port Apache. The
Mhm.
police would not even enter that area of the South Bronx, right? They wound up creating like their own coalitions for, policing the place. What were those guys with the berets? I cannot think of their names. I'm going to Google it and I will add it in somewhere. But, and they were problematic in their own thing, but either way, is it shows almost how like gender and constructs just really just don't exist and can be defined and fluid because all of your same lessons I had to learn and I'm very much the cis. I like being a girl and
Mhm.
I understand the construct of womanhood and I'm cool to ascribe to it. Um, but I also was very violent, survival of the fit, right? Like only the strong survive, that mentality. I often share on social media like pictures of my neighborhood growing up, and I'm like, I'm not scared for this whole shit to crumble because I grew up in what you would think is Beirut. I remember showing my eldest pictures, and they were like, "Why does this look like Slumdog Millionaire?" I'm like, "Oh my god, I love the Bronx. Like, I love where I'm from." And she's like, "It's filthy and it's scary." And I'm like, "Oh my goodness, what just one little generation,
Right.
right? Or like removal from that system." My first husband, her dad was in the Air Force, so we had the benefit of travel, yada yada yada, on how that would just shape somebody's view of it because like no, it's home to me. It felt very normal, and that becomes normalized.
Mhm.
But focusing back on you, like,
Yeah.
and all of those foundations of your own masculinity.
Yeah.
How would you say your personal evolution, the how did this man, who's also been, how did this man that's sitting here now become, right? Because you're going to be assumed to be that anyway, right? Like I talk to my son, is, he has locks. He's a little black boy and he likes to wear his little chains. He likes his little teeth and all of this kind of stuff. But this kid is a suburban black kid.
Yeah. Yeah.
No clue. We live in Atlanta, but for me as a Bronxite, this is 100% like these kids did not even know what an apartment was. Do you understand what I'm saying? They did not understand the concept of an apartment. And I was like, anyway, so like navigating that space, like how has it evolved? Because he's gonna be assumed to be a product of that anyway,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Because of systems of racism. So how did your masculinity evolve, like as you became aware of other systems coming into play?
Man, that's a great question. And
Oh, thank you.
it's I'm like, man, where do I go? How do I articulate this? How do I explain this evolution of who I am today? You know, I think about the fact that I was also raised in a very religious family. And of course, there's very, standardized constructs of what a man, masculinity, um, pretty much with everything, is supposed to
Yeah.
be if you follow the Bible and the religious teachings. And I would say that for me, I started questioning things for the first time in undergrad. Um, I remember, I went away to undergrad about 2 hours north of Philly, in a town called Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, near Scranton, near the Poconos, if folks are familiar with those places from up north.
Mhm.
And it was like when I got out of my environment in the city, and then I would go back home, I would start to see things that I didn't see before. And all the like hopelessness and the violence and all the things that were normal all these years, all of a sudden, they were no longer normal to me. And I started to question, like, why is it like this
Mhm.
here, but it's so different in other places? Why is it, again, just why? I would question these things. And I also began to question religion around those times. I had friends of different beliefs, growing up in Philly, I had a lot of Muslim friends, and I would hear their teachings, their doctrines, and I'm like, why is one right and the other wrong? You know, and then I learned about other religions. And so I just started questioning. I would say that's the first time I started questioning things, and religion being one of the first things. So then, but I continued to follow the conventional path, going to school, getting a degree, getting married, getting a house, having kids, being in church, like all these conventional markers of success.
Yes.
And over time with that journey, I continue to be the person who questioned things. Like just because everyone says this is the way things are supposed to be, it don't work for everybody. So why are we doing it? And another one of those things I began to question um, early on was education, conventional schooling. Again, I come from a family of educators. I mentioned my grandfather, but my dad was a public school teacher. My mom
Oh,
was a public
wow.
school teacher, aunts and uncles who were teachers and principals on, et cetera. So education and the importance of it was something that was instilled in us and da da da. And I found myself teaching. I moved to Atlanta from Philly back in 2007, and I found myself teaching. And that later on that year and into the next year, for the first time, I had gotten a real job. I'm trying to give you the condensed version. I was an entrepreneur, then I had a detour
Yeah,
into
yeah.
teaching. And so my detour into teaching, it really was pivotal because I saw so many brilliant young people, but they're brilliant. For some of them, their brilliance wasn't able to manifest in that environment. So therefore, they
Mm.
were told that they're not brilliant. They were being told that they were less than. And they were adopting feelings of inadequacy because they couldn't meet the standard or meet the mark of what this very condensed, view of success said they should meet. And that didn't make sense to me. And I started going on this journey. I decided, because I've always been an entrepreneur at heart, I said, I'm going to start my own school. And I began researching alternatives. And long story short, that eventually led me to the concept of unschooling. And I got so excited because I said, this is a learning context in which everyone can thrive. Everyone can
Correct.
succeed because it's all about being driven by their innate abilities, their innate interests, their innate passions at their own pace based on their own developmental norms. They're not being forced into a box. That lit me on fire. And that was something else that just showed me that there's alternative ways of being, of living, of doing. Um, so that, and then, my polyamorous journey and coming into the awareness that I was not fit to be a monogamous person for the rest of my life was also transpiring around all that same time.
Right.
And I'm questioning all these things that was told to me was the path to success. And at this point, to be honest, I'm feeling like people set me up for failure because I'm
They
like,
do. They do. Like all of these systems are something to be indoctrinated into. I love that. I'm gonna totally let you have this
yeah, yeah,
moment. But like I also unschool my children, right? Like you see me, you are Facebook friends, so you see me complaining all the time about school. And I love my school. I love the teachers. And I'm intentionally black. I intentionally place them in spaces that they will see themselves, not only in the children, but like the head teacher is a black man with locks, right? Like the unambiguously black, openly queer, flamboyantly queer, like just like all of this beautiful richness of blackness is around them
mhm,
consistently. And yet, and still, I am woefully disappointed because it's still operating within a system that is really a system of indoctrination,
yeah,
right? Like, we have to admit that education is that. And I had unschooled them at this point in time as I started this business. I was like, hey, honey, school's a free babysitter. Okay. So just go there and don't start too much trouble, right? Like, this is free childcare, and it's absurd how much like Montessori schools cost. But when I first bought this house, I had an unschooling co-op called Erin's Place. And so that just excited me to learn that about you that I didn't know. But yes, segue, because I'm interested in how your masculinity evolved from a very sounds intense. It's just like, like that rigidness within Black communities that we have, right? Like being a good Christian, showing up in this sort of way, getting your education, each one teach one, bring one along with you,
yeah.
sort of indoctrination that also happens very specifically within our community. How did that evolution become Dr. Sunjata, who's before us in polyamory, when being
Yeah.
raised a Christian? And like somewhere in there, we'll try to wrap this up and you're going to share all the links to all your yumminess. And I want more time with you at another time when you're free. Okay. Okay. Here
Yeah,
we go.
we could definitely do a part two if necessary, and
I
or
love
just
that.
there's definitely more to unpack. I'm trying to give the condensed versions.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
then,
yeah. No, no.
I
Anytime.
appreciate your questions, and please stop me to pull some things out because I question that myself sometimes. I'm like, how did I become this person? I'm totally different than my friends, the people I grew up with, my college buddies that we're all still in contact. I find myself going around them and getting triggered by the misogyny, the homophobia, and the little like subtle jokes and conversations that are just the standard in the way that
Mm-hmm.
men, especially men of African descent, communicate in our day to days. I'm saying, let's say in the conventional speaking day to day, that I've like walked away from and I've transitioned away from and I've gained more awareness around being more sensitive to these things that it has made it hard for me to really connect with a lot of African American men from my generation because of how different I've become. Um, and I honestly question that myself so much. Like, how did I become this way? There was no specific influence. um, I would say that the biggest thing is, I don't know, I've just always had this kind of like innate drive to be a part of embodying liberation. you
Mm,
know, like liberation. And I just kept living into that. And what does that mean for me? And what does that mean for other people? And how do I need to show up in the world so I'm not being a hypocrite on my own liberation journey where I am showing up in ways that's oppressing other people? And so for me, that meant unlearning the homophobia that was
everything.
indoctrinated to me as a young man growing up, where people use slurs to refer to people as gay as being like a putting people down to say that's gay, or you acting gay, or calling people faggot and things like that that were just the norm that I unlearned, or just saying people who are, homosexual, there's something wrong with them, and all these different things that I unlearned intentionally. And I will say, being in polyamorous spaces has done a lot for that evolution and that growth for the over the last 7 years. It started before then, when I began to question things, as I began to learn more and more, just about, more as more and more people showed up in the world and started to express their truth. Um, it caused me to question, like, why was I holding these biases and these beliefs? Why shouldn't I just listen to people, like listen to the oppressed people, and that's ultimately what it all boiled down to. At every stage, everything that I walked away from, every conventional system that was inherently oppressive, and I can name a bunch of them, that I walked away from. And I gave you all a brief story about the religion and the schooling part of it, and also the conventional, no, mononormative relationships,
Hmm.
that I walked away from, um, to live into my polyamorous truth. That was a whole journey. That was a roller coaster and really hard. But I learned so much about myself. I learned so much about the world because, specifically with the polyamory thing, I wanted to be understood. Once I understood that about myself, and I refused to, show up in the world as like a cheater, just because I recognized this within myself. I also had a level of integrity with myself where I knew I didn't want to be a cheater. So if I was going to live my truth, I had to be honest with, my now ex-wife, the people around me, friends and family. And I caught a lot of backlash for that. A lot of backlash, and it was so hard, but I wanted to be heard. I wanted to be understood. And that gave me a lot of empathy for other people who were in a position of being misunderstood because of ways they may show up that's not conventional. So I would say that also played a huge role in that.
I love that. I'm going to say my key takeaway from this, which I find very interesting when I listen to people, because I consistently tell people to become curious. You want to
Mhm.
start your liberation journey? Just start to question. You stop, don't seek an answer, ask a question, right? And like throughout this entire wonderful journey of your life, which I deeply appreciate this time, you just kept becoming more and more and more and more curious, right? Okay, well, how does this interconnect? How does that, okay, but then how is that showing up? And then how do I want to show up? And how do I want to be perceived? And how, like, staying curious, I think, has been one of the greatest things for my own liberation journey. And I,
Mhm.
like you, I share my entire life. Like, you could, like, go back 15 years and, like what I had for breakfast. You know what I'm saying? Um, and I don't delete anything, like, so you could see my own growth. Like, when I first started out with writing, I had a blog that was called Dare I Say God, because I was so deep into my women's ministry and this, that, and the other thing, and having these revelations. And I had a similar revelation on a women's retreat, and I was like, no. And then broke out from those constructs, et cetera, et cetera. I'm loving this conversation, but I know that you have to go, and you gave me your time, and I still want you to be able to breathe and regulate for your next thing. So I'm going to ask one final question. Then you tell us where we can find you. Is I'm 100% going to have my son listen to this. So if you could tell my son and other Black boys and masked children one bit of advice while navigating being a Black man in this world,
Mhm.
showing up and the evolution from birth until this amazing human in front of me, what three things would you tell him? And he's 8, so break it
Okay.
down.
So what I would say is, number one, like, trust yourself.
Mm,
Like, trust yourself. Like, we all have this inner knowing. We all have inner guidance. Some people call it our sixth sense, right? And there's this inner knowing, there's this sixth sense that always pulls us towards our most authentic way of being and doing and thinking and showing up in the world. And then there's this decision that we always have to make. Do I want to, or there's a decision that every person will be confronted with in their growth and evolution and living in this world as they age, is like, do I want to be the person that that person and that person or that TV show or that movie or that song says I should be? Or do I want to continue to trust myself, trust my inner guidance, trust my inner knowing, my intuition? And I would say always trust and move in the direction of your inner guidance and your inner knowing, even if it doesn't fit within the construct or the box that other people want you to be in. That's what I would say. Number one. The second thing is similar, is self-love. Um, self-love, again, is interconnected with what I just said, right? Self-love says that you are adequate, you are okay as you were designed. You don't have to change anything. You were put here for a purpose, and the purpose is already in you. It's in your DNA. It's in the way that you're evolving, the ways that you think. Even if some people may think it's different, well, that's your difference is needed. The beautiful thing about nature is that, this idea of biodiversity. Diversity is great. We don't need everyone being the same. We don't need everyone thinking the same. We don't need everyone looking the same. Conventional society gives us these like images of like what's success and what's beautiful and what's good and what's right. And I would say to any young person, you need to know that that's a very small example of what success and beauty and good is right. It's way broader than anything that anyone can project onto you or what we currently see in the conventional popular culture. So self-love says, love yourself. You are adequate. You are enough. You are successful just because you're here and you wake up every day. You don't have to do anything special to become because you already are. And that's huge. And the last thing I would say is surround yourself with people who will respect your agency and respect you as you show up loving yourself and as you show up trusting yourself. That will repel some people and it will attract others. And it's okay either way. So those would be the three things that I would share with any young person.
I had to bite my tongue from not talking or breathing or like, amen, hallelujah, praise break. Because I want you to know that I'm going to take that very specific. I literally want to cry right now. So I'm going to definitely let you be going at your heart out because I don't cry in public. Um, I'm going to literally take that portion and play that for him
Mm,
and just clip it and play it over and over. So he has a man's voice telling
mhm,
him the same things I tell him all the time. But will he identify it the same way as
yeah.
he will in hearing it in your resonance? I thank you for this time. I thank you for this moment. I thank you for existing in this time and space.
It's my
I'll let
pleasure.
you go because I'm crying and I get really flush and I don't enjoy that look and I'm vain.
Yes, yes. It's my
No, but
pleasure. Thank
seriously,
you.
please share your links, tell people where they
Yeah.
could find you, and we'll do this again another time.
Okay, yeah. And I gotta say, thank you for, opening up your platform for me to share. You've
Pleasure.
created such a wonderful platform. You're such a powerhouse. People follow you, they respect your voice. And you've already being connected to you has already done wonders, in terms of other people finding me and my work.
I love
Um,
that.
I'm just grateful, that you continue to open up your platform for me to share and introduce me to new folks. And so folks can find me at sustainablesolutionsmedia.com. That is my media platform that I share with my nesting partner, life partner, Shani, and we write articles, we podcast across several different, sections, I would say, and each one has a different topic. So you can come there and you can get a whole lot of different things from anti-oppression to communication to non-monogamy, polyamory, to, I'm writing a book that I'm blogging a book that I'm blogging. Every week I release a new portion of this book that I'm blogging. So that I'm going to release when it's all done. And, my old podcast that talks about systems thinking and how to understand and break down all these systems called Theory of Indivisibility can be found.
That I'm gonna say right now, if nothing else, that should be the introduction to just who you are, how you think, and this interconnected journey.
Yeah, yeah,
I binged that when you first told me about it. Anyway,
yeah, yeah.
listen, you gotta go. I love you. I think you're amazing. Give me all of the links so I can put this, because what I'm gonna do is I share it on my Substack with all the links, the connecting, and I'm gonna send you a request to be like a co-host or what have you on the thing. And again, thank you for your time and space. You are amazing and brilliant. And I'm so glad you exist in my timeline at this moment.
No doubt, no doubt. Sending much love to all your listeners and followers, and we'll be connecting again soon.
Indeed. Take care, my love.